Bakers, happy Thursday, and welcome to today's Thought Leadership Thursday with the Protein Brewery. The Protein Brewery was founded in 2020 to develop and commercialize the route towards plant-based food ingredients based on fermentation. Their headquarters is based in the Netherlands, where they opened their certified pilot plant, which is designed to facilitate the full process of their hero food ingredient fermenting. Today, we are joined by Deb Anderson. Hi, Deb.
Hi, Lynn.
Deb is the Director of New Business Development at the Protein Bakery. Well, Deb, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do at the Protein Brewery?
Certainly, Lynn. And thank you for inviting me to be here today on Thought Leadership Thursday. It is a pleasure. As Lynn mentioned, my name is Deb Anderson, and I am the Director of New Business Development at the Protein Brewery. As Lynn mentioned, the Protein Brewery is relatively new in the ingredient world, and my role at the Protein Brewery is to bring the message of who we are and what we do to the United States in better-for-you bakery, bars, snacks, and tortillas. My background happens to be in product development, and that's my first love. And so I always like to know how our products work within applications.
So, what kind of plant-based, non-allergenic, high protein, high fiber ingredient do you offer?
We have a fermentation derived complete protein, which means it has a protein digestibility score of 1. It is 50% protein, approximately 35% insoluble dietary fiber, essential fatty acids, vitamins, and minerals. So essentially, what does that mean? We take a carbohydrate substrate, we add our fungi strain on it, we add a little bit of nitrogen, it consumes all those carbohydrates and converts those into that complete protein and insoluble dietary fiber. So it's a whole food product. Nothing extracted, nothing subtracted.
That's amazing. So, what does the Protein Brewery believe in?
Our mission is that we want to be able to make an impactful contribution in battling the climate change and food scarcity. Those were the two founding principles that our founder had.
So, what is the importance of nutrition and sustainability in baking?
Traditionally, and when I grew up, baking was higher in carbohydrates, which meant it was really, really yummy to eat. But now, since the pandemic, consumers are really aware of what they're putting into their body. They're looking for more nutrition. Now, while bakery products are wonderful to eat, they do have more carbohydrates than protein and dietary fiber. But consumers also want not to compromise on taste or texture. And that's where it comes into a bit of a challenge, because as we increase protein and dietary fiber into the traditional bakery products, we tend to get a heavier and denser product. About
So,
sustainability,
yeah.
yes, and sustainability. Our consumers that are up and coming, the ones that have the disposable income, are our Generation Z. They are the ones that are very aware of what's happening in the planet. And they want to be able to spend their money on products that they feel in their heart is good for the planet and for the future. And that's where we bring together the nutrition and the sustainability all into one package.
Let's talk about fungi. Why and how can fungi play an important role?
That's a good question, Lynn, because one doesn't really think that fungi and bakery would go together. But when we look at the three different kingdoms, we've got the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, and the fungi kingdom. The fungi kingdom is more closely related to animal kingdom than it actually is to the plants, surprisingly. And with that said, that means that the composition, the nutritional composition of fungi is closer to animal-based products than it is to plants. And that therefore we have a complete protein. That's when we talk about that protein digestibility score of being 1, which is very important when we're trying to add nutrition into these products.
Interesting. So, why fungi? Of all the microorganisms, why fungi?
That actually comes back to the two principles when our founder started the company, and that was Scalability, so having an impactful contribution, something that can grow like a wild fungi or fungal on a little bit of nothing. And so the scalability was one, and the second was nutrition. And that comes back to that kingdom. So the fungi kingdom is more closely related to the animal kingdom than it is to the plant. So by bringing in fermentation by fungi, we're hitting that scalability so we can have a very large quantity on a very low footprint, as well as having a very high nutrient dense ingredient.
It's amazing that nobody has really thought about this because most new ingredients that come onto the market have an issue with scalability, and it takes probably about a decade before we could breed something or make it into such a pure ingredient that it's really hard to scale. So you really provided a solution right there with the scalability solution.
And
So
that was one of the criteria that our founder had. A
yeah,
lot of times entrepreneurs like to start small and in the lab, and we can make, a gram or 2 grams of the material, but then it's very difficult to scale.
yeah,
Our founder looked at it on a very different lens. He looked at it from the end viewpoint, and he's bringing it back down to to select the correct microbe. So he
love
screened
it.
thousands and thousands of different fungi strains
I
to
can't
come up with
imagine
this
how he
one.
started in the beginning on all those different fungi strains. What do you call your product?
Our trade name for our product is called Fermotine. It is a fermentation derived whole protein and insoluble dietary fiber.
And do you have any tips for bakers working with this product?
That, Lynn, is a very interesting question. Now, as we try to add protein into bakery items, it tends to get relatively heavy and dense. This particular product is very different than anything I have ever worked with, because the protein in this ingredient is non-functional. Now, as a baker, you may say, well, why do I want it if it's non-functional? That's actually the benefit of this ingredient, because it does not gel, bind, emulsify, or foam. It's essentially bringing nutrition to the product without disrupting that very delicate texture. And this particular product has a very mild flavor profile. It almost imparts, in such things like gluten-free, it almost imparts like a whole grain flavor profile with a little bit of that color as well. So it's really that perception that people notice with our ingredient.
Interesting. So I believe in feeding the world, but meat-based protein for our 8 billion or so people is really not sustainable. Tell me why bakers should be using your product.
The other options out there right now to increase protein content and fiber content in bakery products are typically going to come from either plants or from animal sources. Coming from plants, like you mentioned, it's going to be I've heard up to upwards of 10 billion people by the year of 2050. We just don't have that available land. So we have less than 10% available land left. So that means all of our grains, our crops, we don't have that much available land left. So we have to come up with alternative sources of proteins that we can scale. Our particular ingredient, on less than a city block, we can produce thousands of metric tons of our product in less than one city block. The
Wow,
sustainability footprint is incredible. We are going to have a new sustainability life cycle analysis later next year, which we'll be happy to share with you.
that's amazing. And the production of waste is so like minimal on this product too. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Correct. We're almost at zero waste. So what we do is just a little step back on how do we produce this product. Why do we call it the Protein Brewery? Well, essentially we are brewing our proteins. So if you go to a microbrewery, that's essentially our equipment. So we have a vat, no bells, no whistles. We put our carbohydrate substrate in there. We put our fungi source, a little bit of nitrogen. It converts all of those carbohydrates into that complete protein and insoluble dietary fiber. We take that, we spin the water off, we pasteurize it, we dry it, we mill it. So the water source that we're using is going to go back into the next vat. And once we're at scale, we'll be utilizing the heat from the fermenter to help drive down some of the energy costs of the dryer. So we're almost in a zero waste. One of the questions I get frequently, Lynn, are can you be upcycled? When we're at full scale, I think we might be able to be in an upcycle certification. Yet to be determined once we're at scale. Right now, we're in what we like to call our scale up facility. So it's not a pilot plant, but it's also not a full scale production. But as I mentioned, in less than one city block, we're able to make thousands of metric tons of our material. So a lot of material coming out of a very little footprint.
That's amazing because if you compare it to other plant-based solutions like pea or soy or wheat, when we harvest or isolate the proteins out of these crops, there is so much waste as the husks come off, the stalks, the branches, everything, right? And here you have zero, which to me it's amazing. And if we were to utilize protein to up the content of our baked goods, this is a really amazing way to go. So kudos to you and your company
Well,
on
thank you. And
brewing the solution.
yes, it is. And as you mentioned about plants and the growing crops, you really have to be worried about the climate. And as we're looking at our climate change right now, think what's been happening in, Canada, in some other parts where we've had wildfires, we've had droughts. Our particular ingredient, because we've identified a number of different carbohydrate substrates, something that we can find everywhere in the globe, we can switch carbohydrate substrates, and we're not dependent on the environmental footprint.
That's amazing. So what would it look like on the ingredient label if I were to use it in a cookie or a bar, Deb?
Lynn, that's an excellent question. Right now, what FDA requires is that it should be called a common and usual name, not to confuse the consumer. However, consumers have not been consuming this particular product. One of the suggestions that we're going to put in our GRAS dossier, which we'll talk about regulatory here in a minute, is fermented protein fiber, brewed fiber protein. So our combination of fermented, brewed, fiber, and protein. You can also call it fermentation derived fungi. I'm not sure about that one right now, but I think fermented plant protein is another good choice.
I love it. So is fermenting safe to consume and is it FDA approved?
Yep, that's a great lead-in question. Right now, the product is self-affirmed GRAS by an expert panel. Within a few months, we will have our full GRAS dossier submitted to FDA. So what does that mean? Yes, it is safe to consume, and we are going through all the hoops to make sure that FDA and EFSA, which is the European Novel Food Approval, is also on board that it is safe to consume. Now, this is a very long and lengthy process, and the Protein Brewery is really a pioneer in this aspect to go all the way through the novel food. So we're really paving the way for those coming behind us. And it's a really exciting time to be
Yeah,
in pioneers,
yeah.
but it also comes with its bumps and bruises.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I love talking to your company, and learning that that fungi can be grown from, carbohydrates, right? So this is so interesting in terms of understanding your company, your mission. Can you share with us personally how you feel about changing the world with this particular product?
Lynn, I'm really, really excited about this. I've been in the protein space, protein ingredient space, my entire career. And this really opens a lot of doors to areas that I didn't think about in my past career. I wasn't particularly specifically in with bakery, and I see so much opportunity here. I see opportunity within snacks, within tortillas. It's showing some huge benefits. And I'm a consumer. I like to eat things that are good for me, but I don't like to compromise on my taste, and definitely not on texture. My husband is a stickler about texture, and he really likes the products that I make here at home with my ingredient. So I think there's so much opportunity. not only in bakery, but in the future and in the pipeline that we have coming. We have some new things that will be coming down the pike, things like that'll work in snacks and later on in alternative dairy or alternative meats. I just see that the future and horizon is almost endless, and I'm really, really excited about this.
You know what's the one thing that I really like about your ingredient, protein ingredient? It's the ability to not hit any of the top 9 allergens, right? And when I recommend its formulation, people are a little surprised. Like, something, sometimes people need to replace proteins and like, oh, I need to replace it with soy, I need to replace it with, wheat, I need to replace it with whey, that's, I think, the biggest positive side of your ingredient is I don't hit any of the top 9 allergens on the FDA list.
No, you do not, Lynn. It is non-allergenic. It does not hit any of those. And a couple other things we didn't really touch on. It is a wild strain, so it is non-GMO. So it's non-GMO. It is
Nice.
certified gluten-free. It is kosher. It is halal, and it has all the dietary fibers. So those are some other fun things about this ingredient. And being in the protein world, I never like to say there is no flavor, but it is a very conducive flavor for bakery. It gives that little familiarity of a grain type ingredient, even though there's no grain in it at all.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to compare it to pea protein, right? I mean, pea protein is so frequently used in a lot of formulations, and whenever I use pea protein, it has that distinct taste of pea protein, of beans, so that's the nicest part of your product is I don't feel like there is a protein taste to it. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I hope people reach out to you to ask for a sample to try this out, because really you really need to understand how this works in your system, because personally I think this is the future. Fermentation, sustainability, and proteins and feeding the world, that's the future. And I think you touched a lot on these points in our thought leadership today. Go
Thank
ahead.
you. And
Yeah.
oh, I'd like
Are
to
there
say,
any last words from you?
yes, I'd like to say, the pea protein, soy protein, they've come a long way from when they first started, but they do have distinct flavors as well. And by all means, please reach out for a sample. I love to do what I call tips and tricks once you do receive a sample, because this is nothing like you've ever seen before. And that's one of the things when I was in product development, I really appreciated when I had someone to give me some guidelines, some guardrails. Try this or try this. If I'm having challenges, this is what I can do. And that's one of the things that we bring from the Protein Brewery is we help you along your development pathway. None of us have extra time to kill. So take us up on this. And by all means, reach out for a sample. Thank you, Lynn.
All right, Deb. Thanks for coming on today. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Lynn. Bye.